Hello, hello. Okay, there it goes. It works. All right. Let me switch us over. There we go. Still need to fix one little thing. But hello, hello. For anybody who catches this later or catches it here, I'm just going to put on a little bit of music. And then let me just do this. Come here. Come on. Cool. Awesome. All right. So, yeah, okay. So, as I put it before, I'm just going to try something new with this. One of my biggest goals was to talk about role-playing and doing systems and eventually maybe trying to do a long-form campaign. So I figured, why not just try to talk about some systems? Like, I don't talk a lot of, like, I save a lot of systems. I have a folder full of role-playing systems that I have just rarely looked at. And there's a lot of them that I've even supported on Kickstarter or followed and have yet to do anything like follow up with them. And despite being pretty active when it comes to playing, mostly as DM, GM, whatever you want to call it, I just don't really do anything with them yet. So I figured it'd be nice to kind of take a look at some of them, maybe get inspired by them, or maybe think about ideas and how we can make the system work for me, yourself, whoever catches this. So my whole thing with it is, I love doing role playing, but it is a tough thing to accomplish when you are trying to create a campaign with people, either like close friends, people you don't know. It can get kind of tough. That I understand, because for me, role playing is a bit of an intimate thing. The way that I tend to run games is you kind of end up wearing your character on your sleeve. I feel like if you are starting out, at least when it came to me, one of my first characters was pretty much myself. I essentially just inserted myself into a game, which is not a bad choice if that's something you want to do. But what ends up happening that a lot of people I think lose track of when it comes to role playing is how much of what's going on can affect you personally. Well, I think it's important to have a group or community of people that you're playing with who can support each other and realize at the end of the day, it is a game. You guys need to support each other. And that's why you get a lot of these really rough stories, or D&D horror stories as they're called, of people who just don't understand that logic and really push what's socially acceptable for that. So with this in mind, we're going to talk a little bit about what I'm going to use this stream for. Essentially, I just kind of want to come into this Sword World RPG. It is not a new RPG, so I put new in the title. It's been in Japan for about like 35 years, I think is what it says. I think it's on the next page. 35 years that it's been in Japan, but it's finally getting an official translation. And since they're launching a backer kit for it, essentially a Kickstarter for it, I signed up to be notified. I do want to take a look at it when it launches. And so as a result, they do offer a primer, which is exactly what this is. This is just a 90-page document or 67-page document about what you can expect from the game, an adventure that's included, characters that are included, and I kind of want to see what the system does and compare it to systems that I'm familiar with. So in doing so, first maybe I'll write in my little document here about what systems I'm familiar with. So some of my big ones is we're going to do D&D 5e. Boom. Biggest one I know. I've played it for many years. Next one, we'll probably throw in, I'm pretty familiar with I can't remember exactly what it is, Path the Apocalypse. It's essentially a 2d6 system. I've used it for some games like specifically City of the Mist, is a big one that I've used it for. And I've played a lot of one-shots that end up using it. It's a pretty good system. It's very flexible. And then, I'm just gonna make sure I got that right. Let's see what this actually is. Nope, I got it wrong. Hey, of course I did, because why wouldn't I? Powered by the Apocalypse. I was pretty close. There we go. So I'm very familiar with that one. That is... I know. The whole thing with the primer is, I just want to see what it does. And they have to give you a little bit of it here. Let me get back into this. There we go. Powered by the Apocalypse. Another one I'm familiar with. And then, let's say, I would say probably the next big one would probably be Burning Wheel, for anybody who's familiar with that. That's a very crunchy system, but I have ran a whole campaign on it. And it taught me to be a better role player. So I add it in for any chance I get. I bring it up. People need to give it a try. So, if we're going into this with this kind of knowledge, what I want to start with is what I consider like core tenets of, we'll just say role playing in general. Essentially the things that I'm looking for in a system, the things that I'm going to focus on, what I want to do with the system, and how I run games as a game master, dungeon master, however you want to put a title on it. So let's see. Number one most important thing for me is going to be how well does it facilitate role playing? This is a big one, because for me, role playing is essentially the reason you're playing the game. You want to play a character, and for me, a character is only the most interesting when you have some sort of journey, obviously, adventure, but it's also important that you have to suffer. We'll put quotations around that. And I don't mean in the way that you feel pain, but a character has to fail in order to succeed. Those are very important things to me. You don't get Goku, you don't get any of these really popular heroes, Frodo, Lord of the Rings, any fantasy, shonen type stuff, unless that character has a failure that they grow from, and become stronger. If you're not doing that, personally, I feel like you're missing out on what makes role-playing special. So that is obviously one thing that I gotta make sure that a system does well. If it does not have a focus on it, then the system is probably not for me. However, some people like a more gamey system. I'm all for it, just not my particular style. Secondly, for me personally, mechanics are a big thing, but I would say how well does the system balance exploration, conversation, and combat? I feel like as much as I'm familiar with certain systems like Dungeons and Dragons 5th edition, it's really bad about balancing out these three elements of role-playing games. I feel like for Dungeons and Dragons, they've peeled back a lot when it comes to exploration, so much so that there's only a class that just does exploration automatically. So there's not a lot of reason to even explore as much as you say you go there, done. But I feel like adding more depth to the world through exploration is important. And at least for 5th edition in particular, there's a lot of ways that you can add in additional points and elements to that system in order to make it work better. But as a system itself, it's poorly set up for it. It doesn't know how to handle any of that. Most of Dungeons & Dragons is focused specifically on combat. Like, if you base it purely on vanilla Dungeons and Dragons 5th edition, combat is how you make progress. But the way that I've run Dungeons and Dragons is I've worked a lot to make sure that conversation and exploration get added in. That's the only way. How else are you going to fill out and grow a character if they don't have the downtime to be able to discuss their experiences or make connections with their fellow party members? It's easy in a lot of games to just say, oh, well, that just happens. But then you lose out on the fun of being able to experience it yourself while you're in character. So they have to balance it out. So for exploration, it needs to have some system in place to make it interesting and fun. Dungeons & Dragons doesn't have one. It kind of does with having distances to travel, but generally, like I said, if you have a ranger in the party, you don't have to worry about finding food. You don't have to worry about getting water. You don't have to worry about being found. You don't have to be worried about being surprised. It kind of just takes all that away without giving any agency to players. And it's the design idea is to make it easier for DMs just to keep the story moving. But I've had a lot more interesting things happen from random encounters that have led to more world building than I have just trying to get players to the next stop. We'll talk about conversation. Doesn't exactly need a system, but it needs to be injected into scenarios. I feel like when it comes to any kind of combat situation, you should have a way out for characters. Players should be able to, they can obviously just beat the thing with a stick, and that would be fine. They would just be done with that. But it's a lot more dynamic if there's a way to also take care of the enemy that's not just absolutely destroying it. So adding in additional goals, like just speaking to them, trying to make a compromise. Or specifically, I ran a campaign where monsters had an alternative method of dispelling them and had very specific things that you could do based on lore of the monster. The monster would just be like, oh, okay, bye. Like, thanks, you put me to rest. And I feel like that makes battles more interesting for the players. It allows you to kind of play around with your world, build a bigger, more robust environment while having players interact with it. I feel like a big weakness that I see a lot with RPGs, at least role-playing, like tabletop ones, is how little players want to interact with elements of your world, because it's just easier to do a thing. It's easier to just say, oh, I just smack it with my sword and that's it, battle over. But if you are able to inject more conversations into things, yes, Undertale is a great example, because that was kind of its point, was to make an example of having a game where you don't have to hurt anybody. It kind of turned that kind of gaming convention over on its head. And I wouldn't say maybe they've done that before. Obviously, there's been games where you can just talk to enemies. I think Shin Megami Tensei had that in order to recruit. But overall, like, Undertale was the first one to really push it, and now I think it's become more of a popular idea. But I do think it needs to be able to be an approachable goal for players. If you have a party member who is specifically just charisma, you take away a whole element of the game. But conversely, if you have a party member who's just specifically all combat, you still need to be able to make sure that they can accomplish something using their skills that isn't just fighting. And that's a tricky thing to kind of balance out. And sometimes I don't even do it that perfectly. But that brings it to combat. Combat, for me, needs to be pretty free-flowing. I like crunchy combat. I'm not going to lie. I like numbers. I like checking things out and making sure that, things hit and this does this. But after a while, if you're doing more and more things with it, generally, unless you're just really good at note taking, like I'm not, then you lose track of what your system does. The system just falls apart because you will forget that this specific monster, this specific enemy adversary just does this one random thing. And then you go, oh, if I had done that, this whole battle would be much different. But I forgot. But let me just move on. So I feel like combat needs to be flexible enough for both the players and the GM that you are able to make decisions on the fly that don't feel unfair to either party, either yourself as GM or a player. So that's why I liked systems like Powered by Apocalypse with City of the Mist. With that, combat is very free-flowing. There are mechanics, but they're vague enough in idea that you can kind of get away with a lot as long as you can make a good argument for it. And I feel like that is a pretty good way to handle it. I just realized my head was covering the text. But that's not to say that Dungeons & Dragons combat isn't good. It's just, it is crunchy enough to where it takes a long time to get through battles. And it does a lot of the time kind of boil down to, well, let me just knock it unconscious or, stab it through the heart. And then you're done. So while you can inject that into Dungeons & Dragons and make it more dynamic, it'd be best if the system already had something in mind to make it interesting. But yeah, I feel like that's like the 3 core tenets that I look for right past role-playing. Like, role-playing is the most important thing. I want characters to have journeys, I want characters to suffer, and I want characters to grow. And I've always believed in failing forward. Let me put that over. Failing forward. Failure is not always the end. Failure is just another step to get where you're going. And sometimes it sucks when a player is built for something and then the dice say, nope, you failed. So I've always approached it with the idea like, it was out of your hands. It's not that you didn't succeed, it's that you succeeded, but you weren't happy with the result. Like, you could do better. Like, everyone around you thinks you did great, but you're like, you got that perfectionism to it. You're like, I know I can do more. I can do more with this. And I kind of approach it like that. That is a step towards your goal, not just a full stop. It's not a door that gets shut in your face. And I feel like with a lot of modern D&D streams and a lot of modern D&D games, it's obviously played up for laughs, and that's fine because a lot of them for entertainment. But I think in a personal setting with, you're doing this with a group of friends, I think it's just a lot better if you approach it more forgivingly. I think playing it up for a laugh can work if that's how your group is. But I think overall, for the health of the game, it works a lot better if you just work on failing forward. Big thing for me. Past that, I think for me, setting creation. So any setting and we'll call them adversaries because it could be a variety of things. An adversary creation tools. I think a big thing is if I bring up Dungeons & Dragons 5th edition, one of the biggest criticisms I have for it is that while the realm that is in Dungeons & Dragons exists, it is a living, breathing world. It has different settings, different cities, different towns, different races. There are obviously relationships that the world is supposed to have. I don't care about any of it. It's not super important. The 5th edition is still, to me, a very loose system that is designed for you to more build a world and not use what it already has. So much so that I forget a lot of what goes on in Dungeons & Dragons and some of its bigger important things because I've never used it for its official content. I've always just used it as a basis for something that I wanted to create. So I think having a system that lets you do that and has those options is a lot more desirable than just having something that is rigid in its design, at least when it comes to its world. And I feel like a lot of RPG systems lately have been really good about that. They have those in there as options just for people who are starting out to have something to go off of. But tools would be good. So for setting, needs to give me the ability to be just flexible enough for what I'm looking to do with it. I think for setting, I'm looking to have something that is, I tend to play a little bit more vaguely with things. My idea is that when you are essentially tackling your world, being a little vague is okay. It even works when it comes to character design. We'll just put vagueness so I remember I said all this. But if you're a little bit more vague with everything that you do, it allows for more development in different areas that you might not have even expected. It also allows your players to also fill in gaps. I feel like role-playing is a group effort. Everyone can be a part of it. You don't have to be fully in charge of everything all the time if you're running the game, or even if you are a player and your DM's running the game. I think it's okay for players to inject things into the world. It shouldn't be an issue as long, and if it is, you know, you just say so. Like, oh, I don't think that might work. I don't think that's actually what we're looking for. But what about this? You know, it's the old improv rule. Yes and, or yes but can also work. So for a setting, I like it to be vague. The little information I'm able to give out in little tiny nuggets here and there allows it so that if something comes up later, I can expound upon it, or a player can inject like, oh, actually, I think my character might have been around that point. And then you can ask, what did your player do? What was your player in charge of? Like, what did your PC, how did they affect this place? And I think that just makes it better overall. And it works for characters as well, like I said earlier. If you have a character and your whole idea is, well, I grew up here, I did this, the less detail you put into that, the more you can make your character flexible enough to fit into whatever campaign you're in. And so that's how I've developed characters. I've developed enemies or say adversaries and other NPCs with the idea that they have a sentence or two that describes them. And then past that, everything else is relatively free game. It gives you the options to build a relationship with a different character that you might want to add later. It gives you the ability to develop a character or develop a relationship with PCs or areas or your world. Just be a little vague. It's okay. Don't be afraid. You don't have to worry about setting details for every little plant and every little fence and every little animal in your world. Leaving it a little vague lets you just put in what you like. And I think that makes it a lot more fun, at least for both parties. If your players are engaged with your world because they're able to add to it, it's one of the best feelings in the world. So I feel like that is a very strong element to what I'm looking for in an RPG system. So hopefully this has it as well. And when it comes to adversaries, I already kind of touched up on it in that they also need to be a little flexible and vague. I learned it from Burning Wheel, but Burning Wheel had a NPC creation system that essentially said, oh, instead of having a whole backstory for your character, write one sentence that represents what their drive is. What are they looking to do? What are they looking to accomplish? What motivates them as a character? And that was it. That is all Burning Wheel said you had to do. Take an NPC, give them a sentence, boom, you're done. That's the character. Go on with that. And it taught me so much about once you simplify it in that manner, you take a look at that one sentence, and if it's, oh, John St. John wants to avenge his dead brother that was killed by the Count of whatever. Now you know that every single action you want to take with that character, that's the motivation for what they do. So instead of having to check back through notes and going like, oh, how would he feel about this? Where was he when this happened? Does it matter because it involves his brother and the Count killing them? He doesn't care. You know, it does not affect him in the least. And that really helped when it came to becoming a better role player. Burning Wheel is a great system. It's super crunchy. So don't tackle it if you don't want to deal with a lot of pages. It's like 700 pages of stuff. But the role-playing aspect of it sold me on, you'll be a better role player. And it didn't lie. So try just creating characters and enemies that have one sentence that describes them. Period. And see how well it works when you look back and go, oh, you know, Does that matter? No, I guess not. But how did they feel based on the fact that this is what they are? That makes it a lot easier to me, personally. I take the lazy DM approach. Just write what notes you need, not notes for literally everything. It's not necessary. But yeah, I think those are my 3. That is the core of what I look for in a system. And out of all the ones that I've definitely run like full-length campaigns on, I mean, 5e is still my favorite because it is the most flexible. I like City of the Mist for its combat more than I like Dungeons & Dragons, and I like Burning Wheel for its roleplay. So I say 5e for me is definitely the best of both of those worlds, where both of them are just flexible enough as compared to the other. Whereas Burning Wheel's combat is too crunchy, and its growth system is pages and pages of reference sheets that you have to pop in and double check just for your character to grow 1 point in a thing. And City of the Mist has really great character customization, really great growth system because it pushes characters. But I feel like it kind of falls behind being too free-flowing. It needs a little bit more rigidity to it. But yeah, so Sword World. I'm obviously a big fan of RPG stuff, but I love anime. I'm a little behind on some of the newer stuff, even though I keep up with a good amount of things. So a more anime-inspired system is kind of appealing to me. Burning Wheel is very hard fantasy. Dungeons & Dragons kind of blends a lot of themes together. And City of the Mist is very comic book heavy. It is 1000% based off like Marvel DC comic books. So hopefully, since this game has been so popular in Japan, I'm kind of hoping it's about the same for the West. So luckily we're able to take a look. It's obviously not going to be super in depth. And obviously if you guys want to check it out, you can. I did include a link in the description for downloading the primer. It's free. You can give money if you like, but on DriveThruRPG, you can just download it and check it out yourself. It's the same document I'm looking at. I also included the backer kit because if you end up liking this and you want to go sign up for when the Kickstarter launches, you can. I think you get a bonus if you do a pre-order. I'm not sponsored, by the way. This is not a sponsored thing. But I think you get like a pin or something. It's kind of cool looking, but maybe you'll change your mind after you take a look at it. So let's see what we're looking at. Let's skip a little bit to, okay. So let's go into some introduction. I don't think I need an introduction to what a tabletop role-playing game is. I have a pretty good idea of what I'm looking for. So let's do this instead. Let's type this in. I'm curious to see how it introduces its world to us. All right, let me take a little sip of water here before my mouth dries out. Ah, nice. Okay, so what is Sword World? So it looks like in Japan, we are in the current edition is 2.5, but we're calling it Sword World in the West. I assume maybe because they're probably just going to compile everything up into that point into one book as opposed to doing different volumes, which is very appreciative. Thank you. So it looks like Sword World is a medieval European fantasy world with swords, magic, and is similar to Lord of the Rings and the Chronicles of Narnia. Okay, so it's still very Western fantasy influenced, with obviously some more anime-esque art to it. So maybe that's probably what I get drawn to more. Not that I have any issue with Western art or Western fantasy art. I love Lord of the Rings. But I feel like that's probably a more appealing blend for me. So we're on the main continent of Raxia. I'm just gonna call it Raxia, sounds better. The main setting of Sword World, there are 3 mystic swords at the beginning of creation. Okay. During Raxia's mythic past, these swords brought forth gods and mortals, thus leading the game its name. Okay. Interesting. So we already have like a setup for the world. Yeah, they're not great. Honestly, this is probably more organized than I normally am because I just mostly write by hand, but that wouldn't look good. You guys probably wouldn't, it would be illegible if I wrote on hand using my stylus. So let's not do that. But yeah, so we are looking at 2 groups of people. You'd say charm, I'd say it looks like a fever dream written by somebody with schizophrenia. But luckily, we don't have to see that. I'm going to spare you guys that horror, and you guys get to deal with my lovely typing noises instead. It'll be in my ASMR stream, role-playing typing. Okay, we're looking at humanoids and elves. Okay, so humanoids are humans and elves. Easy. And then there are other peoples oriented towards order and cooperation. They are often in opposition with Scarborn. Okay, interesting. Chaotic creatures who, while sharing some traits with humanoids, are terrifying and violent. Gotcha. So like demons. I kind of get demons from Freerun on that one. Humanoids and Scarborn have been fighting for thousands of years. The ruins of fallen civilizations resulting from conflict are scattered all over the world. All right. So we've kind of got... So we've got a big conflict that has shaped the world. We have our creation of the world, conflict, and we have two groups of people that, right? And two groups of people in the world who have created this conflict. And as a result, what we're looking at is a world with continuing conflict and is littered with ruins of an old age. So now with just that information, I can already think, luckily I don't have to think about a name for the continent. We're done. It's the world of Roxia. Easy. We have a creation story. I don't have to worry about that either. 3 swords is great. I wonder how it plays into the rest of the mechanics. We've got our humanoids. So obviously playable characters, I assume, stem from either humans or elves. I do see a lot of beast-like people, so I wonder if we are going to get more anthro choices. Maybe they added them in later. We know the main enemies of the world, and now we've got to be able to build the world with a little bit more flavor. We can take a look at it and say, oh, okay, so I can have big cities. We can have whatever the Scarborn, however they live. I'm sure we'll find out later if they do. But now we can also add in our own ruins. We can talk about different things that might have happened because of these conflicts. It allows us a little bit more flexibility to say, oh, you are walking into this large abandoned Colosseum. This was at one point a way, like during maybe a small section of peace between the Scarborn and the humanoids. This was a way for them to delegate. Well, not delegate. This is a way for them to work out through their issues. They had a camp. They had this Colosseum. They would anoint champions in order to combat, and combat by trial. Whoever won, that was the issue solved. I mean, that's just one little thing. I would obviously put a little bit more work into that, but off the top of my head, that's something. All right. As is with most things, PCs are adventurers, so you are exploring the world of Roxia. Easy. You take risks by defeating monsters. Easy. Another little thing. Or delving into ruins. So there you go. So it looks like, before I even got into it, using these ruins is a main tenet of the game, which is perfect. And it's similar to Dungeons and Dragons, obviously, because you have dungeons that you get treasures in. But it's good that we can have a little bit more story behind it that's more relevant to the world. I feel like you can get kind of stuck in Dungeons and Dragons by having specific dungeons with quotations, because they can be a many great thing, varied thing that you kind of lose. I see that dungeons tend to get made with the idea that they are a solo idea. They are just made for a specific thing, and that's it. They exist solely as that, and they don't tend to have any relevance to anything else going on. Sometimes even the most like one-shot campaigns are written that you're just exploring this thing and you come out and it doesn't matter to anything else in the world ever. Food source for ruins or for people. But I think that is something to keep in mind when creating, if they're going to create ruins in this game, trying to make sure they also, dungeon food. Gotcha. Well, that's probably monsters in the thing. I would assume that you could at least find some sort of plants and definitely some monsters in there that are definitely edible. Let's not cut that down. If that's something that a player wants to accomplish, you can make it work. You can always make it work. as long as everybody else is okay with it. Always remember to talk about that with your whole table if it's something that's a little weird. Not super weird, but just a little. But yeah. So, okay. So, big thing to keep in mind, we've got the ruins. Just we want to make sure that the ruins are still relevant to the development of your world. Cool. All right, let's look at the solo tutorial. Okay. So this one you actually can do on your own. So if it's something you're interested in, you want to try it out yourself. This is a solo campaign idea, like an adventure, as you can do both the player and the GM yourself, which I've seen a lot of new RPGs kind of do. And I think it's a good way for you to test out the system, which means that if I am able to get through this document today, maybe I'll do another one where I actually play through it and see how well I do with the system. Then again, I've always had a weird thing about talking with myself and talking to myself as characters. So we'll see how well I get through that before I do anything else. Okay. So it takes about 30 minutes. So yeah, that'll probably be easy. Probably take me about an hour then, considering I've also be messing with a bunch of other stuff. Preparing for things. Okay. So the system uses 2d6. Good to know. So we're similar to how Powered by the Apocalypse works. Since that uses 2 dice, let's see what else it does here. Let me roll these down since I'm kind of blocking them a little bit. I'm going to shrink myself so I'm not blocking so much of the text. Ooh, I'm tiny now. Nice. Okay. Let's see. We've got a copy of the character sheet for the Human Warrior. That's on page 57. We'll take a look at that in a second. We got a battlefield sheet. 66. Okay. Not too sure if whether or not that's like a battle map or if that's a flowchart for combat, but we'll take a look at it in a second once we get through the rest of this. Tokens. Okay. Cool. So it might be map because it does say map here. Understanding your character. All right. Now we're going to get into the nitty-gritty here. Let's get into the crunch. Okay. For a character sheet, we have class levels. Okay. For this, you are a human warrior. You're a trained fighter of human lineage. You have 2 class levels in fighter. Okay. So we have class levels. So I'm going to assume that means that there are very defined roles that you can pick for your character. One of them obviously being fighter. Make a note of that before we get into anything else. And you also have a class range and ranger. Look at that. Okay, so we know fighter ranger exists. Good. Now you've got skills to search and track, perceive environment, and do some sneaking around. Oopsies. You can understand the character's PC by looking at the ability scores on your character sheet. Okay, so we have ability scores. So now we're getting close to what Dungeons and Dragons works with. So it looks like based on that, we are looking at dexterity, agility, strength. I made that one capital for no reason compared to everything else. Vitality. I guess that's the theme I'm doing. And spirit. Just shorthanding those. It's going to bother me if I don't also fix these. Dex. Agility. Beautiful. Okay. So 6 core ability scores. And it is one more than what I would be used to in Dungeons & Dragons, because what they essentially did, well, not one more, but they essentially switched out Constitution with Spirit. So I do wonder how health is handled, if it is a separate thing based off class, or if maybe I assume maybe Vitality is probably actually what takes place for Constitution. So what does that mean I'm missing comparatively? Wisdom. So maybe Spirit is the Wisdom replacement? I guess that makes sense. All right, we'll break it down a little bit more. All right, human average scores are 10. Okay, so very similar to Dungeons & Dragons. 10 is average score, or 11. And then Spirit is a little bit below. So, okay, so that's magic defense. So Spirit might be magic defense. We'll put a question mark to that. Boop. You do not want to fight wizards without the help of a friend. That makes sense if you're a fighter. Then again, I feel like obviously being close range would make you a little bit more advantageous to magic, but I guess it depends on how the system's set up. So we're going to find out. Okay, standard values. You will find standard values for many important traits on your character sheets. Some standard values include ability score bonuses. The higher an ability score... Yeah, that's true. Because Spirit is technically used through that. Don't they also... Do they have wisdom stuff in the original Final Fantasies? Or was it that Spirit also affected white magic? Or was it... Because I remember intelligence always being kind of big for black mages in some of the original Final Fantasies. But I feel like... I don't remember if they had wisdom in the original ones, or if it was Spirit that also affected your more offensive magic for like... And to be fair, if it also affected curing, because I feel like you did more... Like you healed more HP if you had more Spirit or wisdom or whatever it was in there. Similar idea, but yeah. Then again, because obviously in Dungeons & Dragons, most healing spell classes, like Cleric or even Bards... Okay, so it was intelligence just for damage. Okay, so I guess it makes sense. But yeah, healing classes in Dungeons & Dragons tend to just use wisdom for the most part. A lot of healing spells are just wisdom related, unless you are... But honestly, it really depends on your spell class, since you use different abilities for each class. Like Bard is charisma based, and the Bard does learn a lot of healing spells. So maybe that's just a poor example. Maybe I should just keep reading the document. All right, let's take a look at these standard values. So we've got ability score bonuses. Higher an ability score, larger its bonus. Okay, so similar to Dungeons & Dragons, easy. Ability score bonuses are standard values that affect activities such as jumping, climbing, and sensing the emotions of others. Okay, so it sounds like we have skills similar to D&D. That makes it very easy for me to kind of pivot into that. And then we got check packages. Okay, so that's it sounds like they might just be renaming something I'm already used to. They are fundamental skill sets. Okay. So they include technique, movement, observation, knowledge. Okay, let's put those down. Tech, and then move, observation, knowledge. I don't like the way that looks. I feel like there's no good way to put knowledge down. I'm just going to put it. That's the first three. Okay. So your standard values in these four areas will play a big role in your success as an adventurer. Your strongest standard value for check packages is technique with a value of 4. So you can kind of see it down here. I wonder if I can actually zoom in a little bit. There we go. All right. Highlight the whole document. So yeah, we've got a 4 in technique, 3 in movement, 3 in observation, and 0 in knowledge. I see we have some other stuff next to there. So combat traits, it looks like. Yeah, so then they got combat traits. Okay. Those are initiative. Easy. Accuracy. And nope. Defense. Willpower. Just to name a few. So I also see fortitude, magic power, and extra damage. So there's a couple of, and evasion too. As a fighter, you have good accuracy, evasion, and fortitude. So let's add those in there. Just so I remember. Boom. Okay. I'm going to zoom back out so I don't need to take a look at this little page anymore. Is that enough for that? Yeah. Okay. So obviously, your standard value for all 3 of those is 5. Gotcha. So they don't tell us exactly how that math works out, but I'm going to assume... And it definitely has something to do with your ability score. I don't know what else it's adding. Maybe they also have something similar to D&D where you have a proficiency bonus and it's depending on class. I guess we'll find out if they bring it up at all. I'm going to assume that it probably doesn't have a whole lot of character building in this document, considering it's just a primer for the world and system. But we will see. Okay. Now we're on to rolling dice. You will roll both dice, add them together. This is called rolling 2D. Yep. If one dice is a 3, 4, you get a 7. Now, some tables like the history table ask you to roll 2D, but look at each die individually. In these cases, the first die shows in 3, second's 4. Your result is 3 to 4. Okay, that's interesting. Okay, so let me make sure. So for tables, you roll 2D, but look at both individually. Okay, that's a little different, but interesting. I'm curious in how that works with some bigger numbers. Like if you get a 1 and a 7, is there a 1-7 option? I guess we'll find out. It says history table, so we'll be able to see it later. Let me just put that there. History table example. I don't know, I did the whole thing there. Bam. Okay, I can type well. Okay, beginning of the adventure, you have many kinds of adventures. Most of them have 3 basic parts. So we got 3 basic parts. Receive quest. And okay, so you get request. You accomplish the request. And then you receive reward. Okay, very, very basic. Good to know, good to know. These requests can vary from defeating monsters, searching for people, excavating ruins, escorting people, so on. Okay. You receive such requests, adventurers might register with the Adventurers Guild. Okay, so we have an Adventurers Guild. Good to know. Union of Heroes, such as the PCs, and ask for help finding and work. You have visited the Adventurers Guild branch Blue Nose, located in the port city of Harvez, in order to become an adventurer. All right, located in the center of the port city and waterway of Harvez, the Blue Nose is an Adventurers Guild branch that is rumored to be very hospitable to novice adventurers. The first floor is a guild hall with a reception counter, a cafeteria, and a general store selling items useful for adventurers. Okay. I read all that, but that would be me actually doing the adventure, so I'll save that for later. Okay, so we get descriptions of scenes in box format. Very used to that if you've done any one-shots or pre-written adventures for Dungeons & Dragons, because they will put pre-made text in gray boxes for you to actually read out to players. I've used them occasionally. Most of the time, I just wing it to add a little bit more detail or let players kind of inject something into the description as well, like what they do in the middle of this. But there are arguments that sometimes you should treat it like cutscenes. Like sometimes your players just can't react to something that quickly. But obviously these are more informational than they are setting up a whole big action. Okay. So we become an adventurer. We have, okay, we'll skip this little box here. Write your name in the upper left sheets, age and gender. Okay, so we do have our races here. So we've got humans, elves, as we already mentioned. There are tabbits and lichens. So I'm going to assume tabbits are a very rabbit-esque creature. Lichens are very, I'm just going to assume they're wolf-like based on lycanthropy. But that can mean a lot of things for lycanthropy. But I assume they're more varied beast people. So we've got adult ages, maximum lifespan, right? Always got to have the rabbits in there, always. Now we've got dice to determine a brief profile and add depth to background. Okay. So alternatively, you can choose any histories or reasons from the tables or come up with your own. I tend to ask players if they want to come up with their own, but if you're starting out and your player's a little unsure about making a character, tables help. They're just there as a tool. They're not a requirement, but if you throw some dice on a table and it gives you that, your player might work with that. You might work with that. You can also, I've used these tables to make NPCs sometimes. So it just depends on how much time you want to put into it. But if you're still newish and you haven't done a lot of like world building or RPG campaign stuff, using a table is not a bad thing. You're not a bad DM or a bad player for using tools given to you. You can always work on it later. Don't worry about thinking that it makes you less creative because you have to use this. So don't ever think that. Okay. So it is kind of similar to that. It does have like the 1 through 6. So we got the history table, and like I asked, yep. So you get a 1 and a 1 on both dice. This is your experience, and then gotcha. Okay. So we've got our experience. We've got the reasons we're going on to an adventure. And then, okay, so we're going to talk about requests a little bit. Obviously, eliminating monsters, searching for people, excavating ruins, escorting vulnerable travelers, all very basic things. That's all great. Now they manage these requests, introduce them to us adventurers such as you. You don't have an adventuring company yet, so introduce you to requests that you might be able to solve. Okay, so we already know about Scarborn from earlier, but they are a general term for certain monsters that have been hostile to the humanoids of the world. They are horrifying monsters that strongly hate humanoid people, even killing them and eating their flesh. Fantastic. Scarborn cannot be left alone, and standing against their aggression is one of the most important tasks for adventurers. So we have Scarborn goblins. Perfect. Always a great enemy to start an adventure with. Goblins are always the base level monsters. Sometimes I feel bad for them. Unless it's Goblin Slayer, then they're the worst and easiest thing in the world. PCs will perform a variety of actions during adventure. Walking along a path, drawing a sword. Those obviously don't require a little risk, but if you move a large rock, check a door for traps, your success might not be guaranteed. These are how skill checks come into play. Okay, so generally my philosophy on skill checks is that pretty much how the book puts it. My whole thing is if it's something that a player can do or a character can do relatively easily, don't worry about rolling for it. If it's something super simple, if there's no risk for doing it, don't make it roll. That just adds more time that you could use for other things. There's nothing worse than having a character try to open a door, they roll for it, and they fail opening a door. Like, what kind of adventurer are you that you can't open a simple door? It seems a bit, it's a bit much. Just, you know, if it's something simple and there's no inherent risk to doing something, don't worry about making a player roll for it. To me, it's kind of silly. You should save skill checks for things that have very obvious consequences. So something similar to how they put. If they are drawing their sword, obviously you wouldn't think to put that anyway. Walking along a path. If it's an easy jump over and it's like they're trying to jump over a fence and it's just for flavor, it's okay. It might be funny to just be like, oh, roll skill check, see how well you do. But it's not always, you don't have to. And most of the time it's not as funny as you think it is. So, but obviously if they're checking a drawer, yeah, that's a skill check. Moving something huge that you don't think they're capable of doing, it's possible, but that's a skill check. And it needs to have, skill checks are only required if something negative can come out of it, or something that affects the player or affects the party or affects the adventure. Past that, don't waste time. Just keep moving along. You'll find that doing skill checks all over the place will just slow you up more than it will do anything else. Okay, so obviously skill checks, all the same rules. Game is played by applying skill checks, combat skill checks. Cool. So we got a monster knowledge check, which was knowledge sage 5. Okay, I'm just going to copy and paste that because I want an example of that in here just to know what I'm looking for later. Boom. It'll save me more time than just writing it out. Sword World uses brackets to help players know when a scenario's text is referring to a specific skill check, magic spell, or other in-game element. That's why you will almost always see skill checks written within brackets. In the example above, Monster Knowledge Check tells you the specific name of the skill check. Inside the parentheses, knowledge identifies the standard value you use. If there is a slash after standard value, you must have at least one class level in the specified class before you can add the standard value. In this case, the Monster Knowledge Check requires you to have at least one level in the Sage class before you can add your knowledge standard value to the skill check. Finally, the number at the end shows the target number for the skill check. Okay, so we've got our skill check name, Monster Knowledge, class requirement is Sage, so that's after the slash. It's good to know. Standard value is knowledge, that's what we're looking for, and you need to get a 5. Okay, so we've got skill check, and then this is the standard value, class requirement, and target. Easy. Okay, so now I have a good idea of how skill checks work. I wonder how that works for combat. So I guess we'll see if we get to some monsters here soon and see how they are able to do that. Okay, so here is the procedure for attempting skill check. Great. Step 1, determine number. The target number is the total required to succeed. Okay. I would assume that maybe that some would be. I wonder if it would allow, I don't know if the system allows it just yet, looking into it still, but I do wonder if it's similar to how Dungeons & Dragons work. Whenever you do skill checks there, they obviously have specific things set up for different ability scores. So most of the time if you're doing perception, it's based off your wisdom. And if you're doing like a history check, it's based off your intelligence, all stuff that makes sense. But there's still the ability in Dungeons & Dragons to kind of be more flexible with it. Whereas making generally when you want to do a charisma check, like if you want to intimidate somebody, you would use your charisma. Makes sense. But there's arguments to be made that if you're a barbarian and your charisma sucks, you could instead be like, oh, I pick up this thing, I crush it with my hands. And a DM could say, why don't you do intimidation, but use your strength score instead? Because obviously you're using your strength to do that. So I wonder if there's a little bit more leeway with being able to say, well, why don't we do this and use this thing instead? For the class thing, that's tough, because I would assume then, based on the saying, like, oh, a sage would know about monster knowledge because they're a sage. They've done research. So I wonder if that's also going to imply that, yeah. No, I'm really curious if that ends up being that, because I hadn't considered that, but I do wonder if that's still. So my only hope now is to make sure that they actually give you the ability to check for other skills without requiring the class. Or hopefully there are many different types of skills checks using different classes that might be able to substitute that specific check. Then again, I guess if it was this specifically and your character, because obviously they say that this particular character for this adventure is a fighter, so they're not a sage. They don't have that in sage, but they do have a class in ranger. So I wonder if there's a different check for being a ranger as opposed to the sage, or if maybe that's the same check, but maybe it's higher or lower than the other one. I guess we'll see how well, I hope it kind of breaks it down a little bit more, but now I'm more curious about it. But okay, we'll keep breaking this down just a little bit more and more. So obviously we know we got to hit a 5. You roll 2d6, add them together. And then you take the standard value called for the check. Yep. And then make sure the PC has one or more class levels in a specific class before they can add it in. So I wonder if that means you could, tells us that we'd be, let me not say it before I read the rest of it. We'll be using the knowledge standard value from our character sheet, but only if we have one or more class levels in Sage. Okay. We say they have no Sage class levels. That means that, okay. Okay, so we can still make the check. You just won't be able to add in your knowledge unless you have a level in Sage. Okay. Okay, that kind of just alleviates what I was worried about anyway. So I guess just having that class makes you better at those checks because you get to use more of your standard values, but is not necessary to make the check. Good to know. Class, not necessary for check. Just for, whoopsies, just for extra standard value. So in this specific example, since we're a fighter, we don't have the Sage class. We just don't add our knowledge into it, but we could still get a 5 on a roll and pass the check. We just get to lose out on whatever bonus our knowledge was. Okay, that's much better. I was a little worried because that was a good point to make. I was like, oh, yep, maybe certain classes just won't be able to do things. That seems kind of, well, kind of counterintuitive to role-playing, but looks like we can just make the 2D roll and we might be able to get it. Sounds good. Okay. So we got the check value. Treat it as a 0. Okay. 2 special result on your 2D roll can automatically determine succeed or fail. A roll of 2 6s is an automatic success. Okay, so we do have a crit. 2 6s, auto success. Okay. And then no matter how high the target number is, even 100, you always succeed if it's 2 6s. Okay. So it's a little different than D&D because D&D has it where it's more of a homebrew rule where you kind of focus on having, like, so skill checks in D&D don't actually crit based on vanilla, like, rules as written. You don't crit on those. If you get a 1 or 20, you just add it to your regular skill. The idea is because you're supposed to have impossible skill checks where if you set something to a 30 because you don't want anybody to actually accomplish it, that would require somebody to have a 10 in it, which is beyond difficult. It's possible, but it's very hard. and that's why that's implemented. So combat's the only place where crits actually work for D&D 5e, where 1 is an automatic miss, 20 is an automatic critical. So it's interesting that this one actually has a crit check for all skill checks, because obviously they already said that combat is required for skill checks. So we already knew that combat was going to have criticals, but now skill checks get it as well. So that is good to know. And then obviously opposite 2-1s, auto failure. Boom. Okay. Now, critical failures on skill checks are what's been really tough for me, because I already talked about having the ability to fail forward with skill checks and not having failure feel like too much failure. But auto failures are tough because obviously something has to happen. So those get a little bit more tricky to navigate, but I feel like I could probably I feel like depending on the situation, the characters, you can always work something out for that. I just always feel bad. That's why I never use critical skill checks in campaigns, because they get harder to navigate when something feels like, when there's an element of chance that something can just automatically succeed no matter how ridiculous it is, or something can automatically fail no matter how easy it is. So it's a bit harder to implement, but I don't think it's too much of a problem. Not too much, at least. Just a little bit more of a challenge. Let's see. And you gain 50 experience points when you roll an automatic failure. Okay, well, that's a good way to supplement that. 50 experience for failure. It kind of falls into my whole failing forward. Burning Wheel is the same way. If you failed on a skill check, you gained growth on that skill. And that's how you learned new skills in Burning Wheel. Because if you were not proficient in a skill, you could attempt to do it at a ridiculous level and you would fail, but it would add to that skill for you to eventually learn. So that is a good way to kind of help alleviate the issue of an auto failure. All right, let's see. Compare number, check value, boom, easy. So we got our skill check summary, which we already get. All right, back to the story. Don't need this whole much, but we'll check it out to make sure. We already know all of this. No class levels, monster knowledge. Okay, if it's greater than 5, you have knowledge about Scarborn goblins. You can see the information later. You cannot take advantage of the goblin's weakness. Oh, so I guess class levels also give you specific bonuses other than just using standard values. I'm going to assume so. We'll write that down. Specific classes, because this one specifies that as a sage, you could learn about the goblin's weakness. But if you don't have the class level in stage, you don't get to take advantage of that. Okay, so specific classes gain specific bonuses. Which, yeah, I would say not including standard values, SV. Okay, good to know. Now that could be interesting. I guess that also kind of leads to more of a game design where having multiple classes is probably a more beneficial thing than other systems tend to use. But I guess we'll see how well it implements dual classing, or even multiple classes past 2, since this character specifically just uses 2. You don't seem to know about much of them, blah, blah, blah. Now it's time for your fire. Go to the cave. Okay. The items and possession column of a character sheet. You have a check mark in the adventurer set section. Indicates your possession of a torch and a tinder box. Okay, so we have items, and then obviously the items all have their own properties. I mean, these are all very, very basic things. Want to make sure to still get them down though. Just to make sure that we're not going to say that specific items are vague enough that you can just argue whatever you want with them. All right. You light a torch, move forward. Okay, we've got dark vision. I mean, it's just funny that exists in here. I'm just going to write that down for fun. What seems to be the bane of many people, having dark vision or not. You may choose to attack from the cover of darkness. Be on your guard. Okay. So they got the listen check, which is an observation, scout, or ranger. Check 8. So, okay. So for the check, you're noticing it is 3 for observation. You can add your standard value to the roll. Oh, to D, add 3 check value. Okay, because this character does have ranger. You hear sound like someone's eating around the corner. It could be a goblin. If it was less than 8, blah. Now, I guess there was no extra... advantage for having a ranger as compared to the sage. And then... So, I do wonder if maybe that's something that can be changed. Let's see. Possibly add in extra bonuses. Not given for classes. I do wonder if... Normally, if that is a balancing issue, if they thought, oh, what can specific classes get that don't break the game? But I feel like if a sage is going to get a bonus just simply for being a sage, I feel like a ranger or something else should also get a bonus for being able to use that class. But I would have to see how the rest of the system works, because obviously you don't want to overbalance it with being a fighter and then being like, oh, well, since you're a fighter and use your fighter class, go ahead and hit them with another 10 damage. You know, maybe not that, but I'm kind of curious if I might be able to implement that. That might make it feel a little bit better. Let's go scroll down a little bit. Okay. All right, now we've got combat. Good. Now we can see how combat works. We got a single Scarborn Goblin. Prepare your equipment. Okay. What do you know about your enemy? Initiative check. To tell you to attacks first. Okay, so we prepare. Let's do combat steps. Prepare. Monster check. Initiative. Easy. There we go. And deployment. Okay. So we have a front and rear for combat. Okay. I wonder if this is just gonna treat this like an actual Final Fantasy battle. Is this gonna treat it like an actual turn-based RPG? That'd be really funny. So you perform simple actions in combat preparation, such as pulling sword out of its sheath, and you're now holding a torch. You might want to release it to the ground, switch your sword and shield. Even though the torch falls to the ground, it's still useful as a source of light because it illuminates. You could pick it up afterwards. Okay, so this is where you take out equipment. We'll just call it that. You're taking out your equipment. You're getting ready for battle. We've got the monster check. Boom. This is to find out the name of the enemy, kind of attack methods they have, what their weaknesses are, and so on. Since you studied Scarborn Goblins earlier, we'll skip this. So this is obviously to find out monsters. We'll just put that nice and easy. No reason to get more confusing. Rules breakout. What is a weakness? Well, if one of your party members has a class levels in Sage and performs a successful skill check in monster knowledge, all the players can apply the effect described in the monster data labeled weakness. In the case of Scarborn Goblins, every time they receive magic damage, they receive 2 extra points. Okay. So, if the idea is that the Sage gets an extra bonus but it applies to the entire party, then maybe adding an extra bonuses might not be so great since it already applies to the whole party. We'll put another little star next to that just to make sure I double check on those. There are different target numbers for different monsters. The target number for Scarborn Goblins is 10. Okay. Initiative check. Obviously, who attacks first. So 11. There are no class requirements for initiative checks. Unfortunately, the Human's Warrior standard value for initiative is 0, so you can only use the value of a 2D roll. Where'd the target number of 11 come from? Yeah, that's exactly why I sounded confused. If you look on the Scarborn Goblins monster data page on 49, you'll see it has an initiative of 11. That indicates the target number for your initiative check. Okay, so let's actually go check out the monster page. So we're on page 14. We'll go to 49. Monsters. Okay, let's zoom in a little bit here so I can actually see this. Okay. Whoop. Definitely went to some other page with some horrifying fish. Okay, so I see where it says... Where actually does it say that at? Movement speed is 11. Disposition hostile. Yep. Oh, initiative right there in the top right. Okay. So we've got the level 2. It's a Scarborn. It's got its fortitude, willpower, soul scars. All stuff we don't know yet. We can see how much damage it does. It's got 16 hit points. Okay, I don't know. Magic points. I guess it's supposed to be something specific too. Oh, it's got loot as well. Okay. It's starting to sound very, very Final Fantasy-esque with how everything seems to be set up. But okay, now we know that the initiative score comes from that. So let's take a little 2 zooms out one more time. Go back to 14. So we know initiative's at top. So initiative based on monster initiative. Okay. And then if earlier you succeed in high check, the goblin soldiers maybe did not notice your approach. You can add a +4 to the modifier of the roll of this check. Okay. If your initiative check value is equal to or greater than Scarborn's initiative, you win and can go first. Okay. So does that imply for all allies? So that's the only thing it doesn't mention here. Is it does the party move together or separately? That's a question I need to know. And if not, then I would assume the opposite is true, where if maybe one party member succeeds, the whole party does? We'll have to find out. Deployment. Take out the battlefield sheet. Okay, so it was a map. And allies stand either the allied rear guard or front line. And enemies stand as well in either spots of theirs. Individuals in the front line attack each other with swords, bites, other close combat maneuvers. Individual rear guard use arrows, spells. The winner of the initiative check has placed their troops. The second attacker places their troops. Scarborn goblins stand in the frontline area because they can only make melee attacks. You should also stand in the frontline area because your weapon is also for melee. Okay. From this point on, each player takes turns playing one move at a time. The first attacker takes the turn, the second attacker takes the turn, and so on. And once all attackers have taken their turns, their play is right back to it. So, based on that, it does make it sound like it is separate, in that every single party member has to roll initiative in order to tell who moves when, as opposed to it being a specific party, which makes a lot more sense. Okay. But does that mean that... Well, I guess technically that also kind of tidies it up a little bit, because you don't actually have to roll for the goblin. If they can't beat the goblin's initiative, the goblin just always goes either after or before, because it just depends on the player's rolls. That makes it a little bit easier, I guess. It sounds like it might be a little confusing unless it's actually out on paper. But overall, that's not too bad. Okay. Let's attack the enemy. So, place troops on initiative order, and then we're going to move on to, let's attack the enemy. We're just going to put attack. Your only weapon is your bastard sword, which never knew his real sword's father. To attack, follow the steps forward below. Make an accuracy check. Okay, so we need to make an accuracy check. If you hit, determine the damage of your attack. Okay. Hit, damage. If you miss, then next turn. Miss, turn over. All right. To make an accuracy check, to hit your target, accuracy check is 10. On the character sheet, look for the accuracy standard value. In your case, it is 5. Roll 2d at 5. Compare your check value with the target number of the enemy's evasion. So the goblin's evasion is 10. So it is not a dice roll. With other skill checks, ties are treated as failures. Okay, that's a good thing to know. As opposed to D&D, where the old adage is, if it meets, it beats. In Sword World, if it ties, it's a lie. I don't know. We'll work on that. But ties are failures. That's the most important thing I got out of that. And evasion is hit check. All right. Unlike with other skill checks, yep. If it's 11 or higher, okay. And this is also based off of accuracy. So use your accuracy for it. Okay, that needs a little saying. If you hit the target, you continue determining damage. Determine damage. Miss, turn over. Too bad, your turn is over. Yeah. Play proceeds to the next attacker. In this case, the Scarborn Goblin. Okay, then we have to move to avoiding attacks. So let's talk about determining damage then. I could spell determining. Boom. So let's put that right below there. Okay. To determine damage, I need to roll 2d and check the power table for your weapon. Your Bastard Sword has the table below. Oh, geez. Okay. So weapons have a power table. Okay. And then the top row is your result on the 2d6s. The lower row is the damage caused by the weapon for that 2d result. If the roll was a 2, the X, you deal no damage, but you get 50 experience points because that's a critical miss. Whether the attack glanced off armor was definitely dodged is something they will remember. If your result is equal to or greater than your weapon's critical value, you score a critical hit. They are highlighted in red. Your Bastard Sword has a critical value of 10, so on the power table, the 2d results for 10, 11, and 12 are outlined in red to indicate a critical hit. Note the damage of the weapon, then roll 2d again and add that damage to the previous result. Okay. Okay, so they have exploding criticals. Good to know. So explosions are something that isn't like powered by the apocalypse. Essentially, if you roll a crit, you roll again. If you every time you crit, you keep rolling until you don't crit. So looks like in this, you can just continuously crit as long as you hit the crit value of your weapon. So for the Bastard Sword, 10, 11, or 12, you would get that damage. So if you hit it 10, that's 7 damage. If you roll again and you get 11, that's 7 more damage, but you get to roll again until you don't crit. Cool. That's interesting. I wonder what the design philosophy was for that. Because if it's treating like a Final Fantasy game, is it supposed to represent when characters hit multiple times, like in the early games when they do like 5 attacks in a row because they were just hitting criticals and it kept moving? I don't know, but it is good to know. I kind of like that because it can make. It's always good to sometimes have players feel very strong for just existing. So the fact that you can explode on criticals could lead to some really fun moments. Kind of takes the sting away from having auto failure. So there's a lot of good to that system so far. So I'm kind of pleased with that. Let's see. As long as you roll, yep. You stop rolling, add up all damage. You can add the extra damage for your adventures to the attack damage. The human's warrior's extra damage is +4. So not only that, you can do exploding criticals, but no matter what damage you do, you always add in extra damage. Okay. This game is very damage heavy. I'm kind of digging it. Now you take that and you subtract the defense of the character of the target. So on its monster, ABC Goblin has defense of 2. So we subtract defense from target, and then cool. And then you take that away from hit point value. Take away from hit point value. Okay. Easy peasy stuff. Your turn is over. Now we have to worry about avoiding enemy attacks. So let's see how that works. Avoiding enemy attacks. And we'll just hit avoiding attacks. The Scarborn Goblin is attacking you, but you have a chance to avoid the attack. Follow the steps below. Okay. Note your opponent's accuracy. Accuracy checks on enemies do not involve a dice roll, but rather a fixed value in parentheses. A goblin's accuracy is 10. You make an evasion check based off of that. Okay, so accuracy from enemy, and then make evasion based on accuracy check. And so warriors got an extra 5. They add that to the roll. Compared to the accuracy, success is achieved when your check value is 10 or more. Okay. Evasion ties are treated as misses. Yep, already knew that. They cut through the air, they miss you, you take no damage, their turn is over, and now you move back to attacking. Okay, so very, very easy combat system so far. I'm worried about how magic gets added in. Hopefully it's very, very simple. I don't know if it's going to have specific spells that are used similar to D&D, or if it's just like, use this magic and it does this. But I would assume it has more robust magic system, but I guess we'll find out. If you fail an evasion check, the enemy does damage based off of their damage point. For enemy damage. And the GM rolls that damage. So, boom. GM rolls damage. Very different considering that most things didn't roll up until now. Okay, you subtract your defense, similar to the same thing. If you are hit to 0, that's an important note. HP 0 is unconscious. That's good. I was hoping it wasn't super deadly. I always hate a system that really focuses on hyper death is fun in its own way, but it's kind of upsetting because I'm the type of GM who really likes to put a lot of investment into my players' characters, and if they just suddenly die for no reason, that's kind of upsetting for everyone around, unless it's something that's planned. But I like that it's unconscious. It also leads to much more interesting events that can lead from losing to an enemy, as opposed to just being like, all right, you died. Oh, good try. We'll make new characters next time. Now I can be like, the goblins take you prisoner and you have to escape. And there's a lot more interesting things that can come out of a character becoming unconscious as opposed to just straight up dying. All right. Oh, no, there's a death check. I spoke too soon. Okay. Death checks. Good to know. Okay. That is based on a fortitude and says special. The target number starts at 0. Starts at 0. Okay. It increases by 1 for every hit point gone into the negative. Okay. By 1 for negative HP. The human warrior has 24 hit points. If they receive 35 damage, their hit points are negative 11. That makes their target number for the death check 11. So you would have to get an 11, or you have to get a 12. That's the only way to be able to survive that. All right, well, I guess you have 5, so 7. You need to get 6 or higher. Well, no, that's confusing. So in the example above, a 2D result of 6 or higher would be a success. That makes it equal. I thought if it was a skill check, you would fail if it was equal. I wonder if that's a typo. Or maybe I've read something wrong, but I feel like I've written it down. I don't feel like I didn't read it wrong. Where was it that it mentioned the evasion check? Because I swear we just looked at it and it said, if it meets. Yeah. Oh, okay. Other skill checks are treated as failures. Unlike with other skill checks, ties are treated as failures. Okay, so that only counts for accuracy? That's a bit confusing. So it looks like other skill checks actually have it where equaling it is fine. I guess it's just an accuracy check that matters. So if I put this in D&D terms, it looks like skill checks are fine for equal. Okay, let's see. Where's the tie? Okay. So I wrote that down for just accuracy check, but it looks like, let me make this as a note here since I just learned it there. Skill check ties are successes. Except with accuracy checks. So for D&D terms, that would mean that AC is the only thing that you wouldn't be able to equal out on. You would have to overcome the monster's AC in a way, as opposed to D&D, which is equals hits. But skill checks are still equal succeed, with the exception of hitting enemies. Okay, good to know. That would have been bad had I not actually, if I could actually have reading comprehension. All right. So then we would come back down to here. Okay. Right. You've succeeded on a death check. You have accepted your final end for now. You're still unconscious. You have died. Your adventure dies here. Okay. Once you take a moment to calm down, you can certainly try again from the beginning of the adventure. I say, you died. Take a moment to calm down, dog. It'll be all right. Okay, and we've got our summaries. That's good. I might have to cut these out later and make like a quick reference sheet. Okay, so... Okay, and there is awakening stuff. Okay, so there are things... I don't know if it's specific for this. I'm assuming that's a tablet. That looks exactly like the Final Fantasy Tactics. Not exactly Moogles. I guess that... Is the Ivalice Moogles are the ones that have the fluffy ears, I think. Because I don't think the Moogles in that one actually look like regular Moogles. I'm pretty sure they look like rabbits. Anyway, still adorable. Okay, this is all just the adventure. I'm assuming that was the person we played as. Good to know. Aha, intro scenario. Okay. Okay, so this would be after you play the tutorial solo, and then any rules required for that already in there. This is the separate rule book. This is for 2 to 4 players, so this is the actual adventure you'd play with a group. And there are 4 sample characters listed on page 56. And then, yeah, okay. Ready to play adventures for this scenario. Okay, this is what I'm really curious in right now. I might just take a look at these character sheets to get a good idea how characters work. And I might just dig into that full scenario another time, or at least go through it and double check some of the rules just to make sure that I've got everything I need to get it started. Okay, so for characters, we've got our descriptions. Most are superficial details. Players are encouraged to take each character and make them their own. We've got their physical appearance, yep, how they dress, habits and affectations. Why do they adventure? Okay, all typical things that I would normally expect players to kind of put into them. So based on what we have here, we've got a human, and that is the human fighter ranger. Yep, human fighter ranger. So it looks like you can do 4 classes based off just the character sheets. And then we've got the Lycant. This one is a grappler scout. We've got an elf who is a priest marksman. Interesting. There's an elf using a bow. Good times. And then we got our Tabit, who is a sorcerer sage. All right. Then we've got map, battle sheet. Okay, so this is close to the end of the document. So let's look at, we got the additional rules. Okay. It kind of breaks down a little bit in the next page here what they do. So for, let's see if anything I get out of the interest out of these specific characters. So we got the human, fighter rogue, or fighter ranger, I mean. Their primary role in battle is on the front line. Bastard sword they carry can use either 1 hand or 2 hands. Okay, so we have versatility in weapons. That's good. Just using that as a D&D term. They usually use it with 1 hand, but they can drop shield to do 2 hands to do more damage. They have learned Power Strike 1. Where is that on their sheet? Okay, so we've got combat feats. Power Strike 1, which I got right there. Bam. Power Strike 1. So combat feats. And what does it say about this combat feat? They can inflict even more damage when needed, but their evasibility is also reduced in such cases. When using this combat feat, they must be careful of enemy counterattacks. So I'm guessing they have these combat feats separately listed in order to see how they work. But I'm okay with that because I feel like that's a weakness of Dungeons and Dragons when it comes to how Dungeons and Dragons is such a spell, like a magic heavy system, that you tend to run into a power imbalance where martial characters tend to fall behind because they receive less options as you get higher in levels, whereas magic characters tend to not. The more levels they gain, the more tools they receive because of the different levels of spells they get. whereas a lot of martial, they don't get spells most of the time. Like most of the fully physical classes, like fighters, just don't really receive a lot that make them interesting to play other than just say, I attack and that's it. That's my turn. So I like the idea that you can kind of customize a character with these combat feats. I wonder if that works, because I see that it kind of works a little bit for the spell casting as well. But for these ones, they've only listed targeting, so I assume that just affects accuracy, which seems a little bit more balanced at a glance than it would giving them their own separate like additions to just having magic. Because I feel like magic is exactly what makes them strong. They don't really have to worry about giving them much more than that. Then again, I also don't know how else the spell really works in here, considering that they don't have spells listed. So I do wonder how magic is handled with spellcasting classes. Considering all I really see is they have true speech magic, which requires specific class. Sorcerer spells specialize in offensive and curse magic. See the list of magic on page 54 for available magic. Okay. Okay, the spellcasting check. All right. So how does that specifically translate to how much magic? So does that mean they can just use any magic from that list? Let's take a look at the list. This is what I'm moving on to next. I've fallen a bit out of whatever I wanted to do. Rules for magic. Okay. Let me see if they have the combat feats here as well, because I do want to see both before I go anywhere else. Unless it's specified through classes. Interesting. I really don't see a combat feat list, so I do wonder if that's just something they get as they level up, and that's why it's not included in this, since there's no character creation in this specific primer. Huh. Okay. Well, let me not get too distracted. I know where that magic's at, but let me go back to this human fighter and double check, see what they got. Okay, so we know combat feats. Not sure how they're made yet, but we know they exist. Then we've got, since they have a class 1, level 1 ranger, they're good at listening and sneaking. They're outdoors. They can find traps. However, with ranger skills, they increase the effectiveness of medicines. Okay. Swords grace. So we've got lineage characteristics. So it looks like we get specific bonuses for, I'm going to assume races. I know it says like lineages, but I'm assuming, yeah. So it's based off whether or not you're a human. So we're just going to say lineage characteristics, make it easy. I'm just going to use D&D term race. So we got tabbits, humans, lycans, elves, and we all get a different bonus depending on what you pick. So for the human, you would get swords graced or change fate. Once per day, a PC with this trait can flip over both dice after a roll to their opposite sides, changing the roll result. Okay, that's a little more fun than just re-rolling. Both dice must be flipped over. For example, if you use this racial ability when you roll 2 1s, you can turn it into double 6s. I kind of like that. That's kind of fun. It doesn't hurt anything. It's a once per day thing. And it feels very much like a human-esque thing to do. Oh, I did not realize that. Oh, one sec. This whole time. There we go. Did not realize this whole time that I did not have the chat pulled up correctly. Now I do. All right. Boom. Okay. That's kind of fun. Makes humans kind of interesting still. Special techniques that give you advantage to fight for combat feats. So we got the power strike. Allows PC to recklessly and powerfully attack a foe. It deals 4 more damage and hits, but you have a -2 penalty to evasion until the beginning of your next turn. Interesting. And then there's cleave. Exactly. I mean, because of the lucky feat, you get to use it 3 times in D&D. So this one really only has it once per day. But the fact that, whereas with lucky, it just makes it so that you re-roll. This could be used pretty strategically, depending on how you rolled. Like if you just got like a 3 and a 1, one of those is at least going to become a 6. So you at least have some options. But a 3 could become a 4 still. So like you have the option to actually plus out on that, as opposed to being at the whims of fate still. So I think it's more fun. It makes it more fun. It doesn't seem imbalanced comparatively. All right, got cleave, large weapons to attack, cannot be used at the same time as power strike. Okay, so that sounds like to me that implies that maybe only one combat feat can be used at a time, and has to be declared before you use it. So that way you can't just change your mind on it. Okay, that would make it still a little bit easier, because I'm wondering, because it didn't specify that there was actions to everything. So I would assume that this is all made before your one attack that you get. Just saying like, oh, I'm going to add to this attack. So just saying that it limits it to 1 makes it a little bit easier language wise. Like, oh, you can use 1 of your feats before you make this attack, as opposed to having like the action economy of Dungeons and Dragons, where you kind of have to keep in mind like, oh, what action do I have? What bonus action do I need to use? What can I use for my reaction? It becomes kind of bogged down in language. This might make it simplified, just saying you can use this before the one thing you can do, as opposed to worrying about 80 other things. I kind of like that. Simple sometimes works best, at least when you want to get through a campaign. Sometimes complexity can work, but it can also just bog down just as easily. So far, the simplicity of it's working for me. It works for me pretty good. Let's see. 3 enemies using the same accuracy check, but each attack does 3 less damage. Okay, so this specific one says you can attack 3 enemies using the same check. You just do 3 less damage for each attack you do. Okay, that is not too bad. Sorry, something was going off and I had to unplug it. That is not too bad. That's kind of interesting. It definitely works out for being a fighter and still being that front class and being able to whittle down your enemies so that your backline can kind of take care of them. So far, all seems relatively balanced so far. All right. And then obviously because they have the ranger, they can use medicine. They can use life grass. They gain a bonus modifier to restorative effect. The character can add ranger class level plus dexterity modifier to the result on the power table. In the case of healing potions, ranger class level plus intelligence modifier can be added to the result instead. Okay. Good to know. So using medicine, you can add your bonus to the items. Good to know. All right, let's take a look at this Lycant, see what this one does. This one seems kind of like a brawler. I'm guessing, yeah, because of the grappler and the scout. I'm curious on what makes the scout different than the ranger. Like what specifically, how do those differentiate from each other as opposed to one or the other? Okay, so we know the Lycants, muscular lift lineages with beastly ears, flexible tail. Okay. Now this one is a boxer. They're armed with weapons that strengthen their fists and legs with flexible armor that doesn't hinder movement. So we've got essentially a monk. Now they're inferior to fighter in terms of the power of a single blow, but they can attack twice. So does that... Oh, okay. So based off of that, I'm assuming that combat feats are not chosen. They're given to you based off of your class, which can kind of work. So with that, now I'm kind of curious with this, since it specifies, oh, they do less damage than what you can do as a fighter. But if you're able to pick other classes, could they just pick the level 1 fighter, for example? And would that get them Power Strike 1, which would be, you know, okay, I see where it says actually, where it says that Cleve learned at class level 3. So yeah, class levels determine what you get. So if he's able to pick up fighters, I mean, he can also use that, which means technically he's just as good as a fighter at that point. I mean, I guess I'm also curious in how weapons add into this, since D&D uses proficiencies for classes where you get specific weapons depending on your class. Does that also apply to this? Like, if this grappler picks up fighter class level 1, do they also get the ability to use the bastard sword? Or I would assume that's how it works. They do mention weapon proficiency here because they can add 1 damage to wrestling. So interesting to keep in mind. But we'll go back down through breaking it. So they are not as good as withstanding damage. They can avoid damage very well. They also have a scout class level. Okay, so that's good at locating and disarming traps. So yeah, it says that sounds like the same thing a ranger does. So now I'm curious in what exactly that does. How is that any different? All right, beast form. So Lycans get beast form. Good to know. And then changes their head into an animal-like form, increases their physical power. In beast form, they add 2 to their strength modifier, resulting in 2 extra damage. They get dark vision, and they can no longer speak any other language other than Lycant. Okay, so 2 to strength, and dark vision, and speak only Lycant. And it takes 10 seconds or 1 round in battle to change to or from beast form. Ooh, that's good. That's a good little rule they popped in there. Let's put that back into combat. A 1 round in battle is 10 seconds. Always good to know. Now, curious whether a whole round, I assume, is when every participant takes a turn, as opposed to 1 at a time. There is no limit to the number of times they can change per day. Oh, okay. Combat feats. Chain attack. After making a melee attack during your turn, you may make another melee attack. You choose another weapon if you wish, but no attack can be two-handed. Thus, throw attack cannot be incorporated into a chain attack. Okay, so multi-attack essentially, without two-handed. Okay. Kind of similar to what the monk does in D&D. They just use a bonus action to do a second hit anyway. All right. Is not proficient in A-rank fighting weapons. They add 1 damage to wrestling. They've already been added to the bonus on the character sheet. Evasive maneuvers. At eventual level 3, they add 1 to evasion. And they also gain throw attack through the grappler class. When in melee combat, they can grab an enemy with 2 limbs and throw them. Okay. If this attack hits, the opponent falls prone. They suffer a -2 penalty to their accuracy and evasion to the next turn. Okay. So we have different ways for you to affect the enemies in the battle in order to assist your fellow party members. That's good. I like that. Okay. All right, let's see what we've got for the elf. This sounds like they are the ranged class that they want to use an example for. So if we've got the fighter and we've got the monk, we're definitely looking more typically at what a ranger would be, but this is just marksman. So let's see what they are able to accomplish. Okay, so they got 2 class levels in priest, so we're also looking kind of like the cleric stuff. They can handle divine magic, good for defense and recovery. They can cast Cure Wounds, which restores reduced HP. Awaken, which restores consciousness, returns to HP to 1. And Field Protection, which protects others from damage. Okay, so we've got elf. She is marksman, priest, and essentially can use healing magic. And let's see. And they can attack by shooting arrows from the rear line or rear area. Since they have no melee combat skill, it could be fatal to go to the front line. If all allies in the front line are wiped out, the enemy will step into the rear guard area. Okay, that's a good thing to know. Let me add that back into the combat as well. If front line is wiped out, enemy steps to back line. Good to know. Okay. I like one little lane for that. Probably was maybe later on in the other thing, maybe through the actual adventure tutorial, but it's nice to get little tidbits of information other places as I'm reading this. Okay. So it would behoove the poor old elf to make sure that she keeps her other party members topped up on HP lest she gets smacked in the rear guard. They have not learned the Scout, Ranger, or Sage. They are not good at searching or checking the strength. That is best for your other party members to handle. Okay, so for lineage, she's looking at, let's see, Swords Grace or Gentle Water, which says they can spend 1 hour underwater and suffer no penalties for travel checks, skill checks, spellcasting checks, or casting spells. They add 2 to resistance checks against poison and disease. Okay, so we're essentially looking at somebody who kind of, so this is one of the issues I was worried about. They mitigate a bit of the expiration since they don't, well, maybe not so much because it just says they don't take penalties for travel checks. So assuming if you're actually traveling and everybody's making a check, if she fails the check, she just doesn't take penalties. So that could lead to some interesting things. So I'll put another star on that one. So maybe it's not as bad as I thought it was. Doesn't take penalties for skill checks, spellcasting checks, or casting spells. So no penalties on certain skill checks. So I don't want to write it all down. It'd be on the sheet anyway. And they add 2 for resistance on poison and disease. Easy. They have dark vision. Okay, so far we have one class that has built-in dark vision, or one lineage. I don't see it on the Tablet, so I'm guessing the Tablet doesn't have it. No, it doesn't look like Tablet does. So we have one class that has it built in and one class that gets it when they transform. Okay. Not too terribly imbalanced then. They get targeting. If they cast spells or fire weapons in a skirmish area where enemies and allies are mixed together, they will not accidentally hit unintended targets. Okay. So that is a possibility then. Won't hit unintended targets. Okay. Possible mechanic for hitting allies. I'll have to double check on that later too. Okay. Now, meta magic. The same spell can be cast on multiple targets at the same time using the same action. The spellcasting check is performed only once. The MP consumed is paid for each target. For example, if a spell costs 3 MP to use on 3 targets, it costs a total of 9. Okay. How much magic points does she have? Where are those at one more time? Up there at the top, she has 20. Okay. That seems pretty high. What do the other ones have? 10, 7, 24? Okay. So it looks like she can multiple cast. Yeah, so she could cast healing on multiple targets. Okay. Good to know. And then she's got a priest magic. And then that's page 53 for the magic there. Okay, so we kind of have an idea of how our ranged class and our healing class looks. So let's look at the last one, the little Tabbit. Now the Tabbit, bipedal rabbit-like people. Boop, Tabbit. Nope, it auto-corrected. Sorry, it's just Tabbit. There we go. Okay, they lack physical power, but they have natural ease with magic. They are sorcerer and a sage. So they can use spells like Energy Bolt, which ignores enemies' defense and inflicting damage. This is useful when you want to make sure you finish an enemy off. Dull Weapon is another powerful weakening spell, which reduces power. Okay. Since they have the Sage, they can do monster checks, and they will be able to apply the monster's weakness in combat. They have no melee combat. It can be fatal for them to go to front line, so we already know about that. Okay, so we got Sixth Sense, Danger Sense check, which normally can only be performed at the Scout or Ranger class levels, can be performed using total class levels plus Intelligence modifier as the standard value. So Tabbits can technically make a Danger Sense check without need of having Ranger or Scout. Good to know. So that is just a racial thing. Good, good, good. Kind of makes them, it makes them a little more interesting. And I guess it kind of just makes them more specialized to not have to take extra classes, like we discussed with like the Lycant being able to take more combat focused areas to round them out. Targeting. We already know what targeting does. We got the meta magic. Same thing as what the elf did. Okay, so now we have True Speech. They specialize in offensive and curse magic. Okay. So True Speech magic, which is offensive and curse. And knowing the weakness, which is when they perform monster checks. Boom. Knowing the weakness. Monster checks. Which makes them so they very much have shoehorned them definitely into being, I say shoehorned, there's still some flexibility there, but it feels like the magic classes are definitely designed to be the support classes. They do have the ability to do damage based on the spells they offer, but it seems like there's also a lot more, they can do a lot more with the tools given to them when it comes to the magic, as opposed to just dealing damage. So they're able to weaken enemies, finish enemies off. I assume maybe at the cost of doing too much damage. But since we haven't looked at what the magic is capable of yet, I'm afraid to make that assumption and be wrong. Because, oh, yeah, no, the Energy Bolt. Okay, so taking a look at the Energy Bolt spell that they had, the damage is definitely lower than what was capable on the Bastard Sword for the fighter. It by at least 1 or 2 points. So, okay. So they changed out doing more damage for being more versatile in assisting their party members. And it looks like a lot of the other spells are definitely more suited for support. So I kind of like that a little bit more. Because obviously they still do have some offensive spells. At least the priest doesn't, from what I can tell. She's all support and healing. But at least with the sorcerer, there's only really one big offensive spell, at least based on this list. The rest of them are all very support heavy. So that's nice. I guess it does make it tough for the sorcerer though, considering that means they're limited by MP consumption, as opposed to the elf, who is also part marksman, so who can also fire arrows as backup attacks. I guess that's kind of rough with having the Tappet doesn't really have any extra ability to do more damage other than just using spells. But I wonder if that can be fixed, because I don't even see a weapon on her. Yeah, she has a shield, but yeah. So, but regardless of that, I'm sure that's something that can be worked on or changed. But I like the idea of them being more focused on support. I feel like that's what magic should be. It's good to have these awesome, cool spells to do stuff with, but like, it feels nice to have a magic class be squishy enough that it needs the support of a front line. Which I feel like in D&D, since you can get so much distance away from the enemy, it kind of makes it really easy to not just engage and absolutely just blow them away with high level spells and call it a day. at least with this, it feels as though having a frontline and a backline kind of mitigates that issue a tiny bit, since now these particular PCs are going to be really reliant on making sure they don't absolutely get swamped, since they lack this defense and equipment that the frontline obviously has. So I kind of like that. So far, I have a bit of hope for this. Obviously, I still need to come through and take a look on how we deal with magic, how those specifically work in combat. I am curious on what the monsters are capable of doing and how flexible it would be to kind of change them if I need to. Like, obviously, one of the biggest things in RPGs, at least classic RPGs, is just having a reskinned monster and calling it, the goblin, and then the green one's the goblin, then the red one's the hobgoblin, but he uses the same sprite. So I wonder how possible that is using this system and what the balance is to that. So if I wanted to change the Scarborn goblin, what would be sensible to change to have like a leader goblin? I would assume they probably already have something similar in the book already to be a good example, but I like to change monsters. I like them to be a little bit more interesting if I have to. And it's nice to be able to change those stats on the fly to make more dynamic combat. So I'm just kind of curious in that. I might be asking a lot of it right now, considering this is just the primer that is currently, and the rest of it is currently being translated. But so far, I like it. I think it's worth giving it a shot and trying it out. I might just try to run this as a one shot, read through this campaign here myself, and see how it works. I am interested in coming back to it. But yeah, so I'm at the point where I like what I've written down, what I've seen. I do want to give it a try, and the best way to see how an RPG really works is to put some actual play into it and see how easy it is to run and how flexible it is, how quickly it runs through stuff. And pacing is always a big thing when it comes to RPGs. What feels slow, what doesn't feel slow. And that's only going to come down from playing. But I assume since this RPG has like 35 years of existing, that a lot of those have probably been worked through already. So I'm hoping that it probably runs really well. That's what I'm hoping. But that's all I really got for this. I was able to go through it. I'm glad I got to talk about RPGs. It's one of the biggest things I wanted to do with this. I was a little worried about how this would work because I didn't know how I was going to be able to sit here and read a document and try to make it interesting. So I hope me adding in some of my philosophy and habits and thoughts about RPGs as a whole kind of helped with that and made it a little bit more interesting to listen to me than just reading. But yeah, past that, I hope everyone who tuned in really enjoyed it. Because if you did, just let me know and I'll do more of them. I have plenty more systems that I just have sitting in a folder on my computer that I have yet to ever look at. And I would love to get a chance to talk about them and make more comparisons and see what can work and what doesn't. Because even if you never play a system, knowing how one works can really help you increase your skill at running other systems. From what I've learned from Burning Wheel and Powered by the Apocalypse has really helped me make Dungeons & Dragons 5th edition work for me. But while it might not work for everyone, it is a lot of fun to just try new things out. And you will learn at least hopefully one or two things that you can just bring with you. And by playing around with new systems, you can maybe find something that could be your new system that you want to run forever, or at least help you improve with what you want to do, even as a player. Just knowing how other things work and learning character customization or development from other systems can help you bring that back to your group, your DM, your GM, and also help you be a more active part of your adventure. As somebody who's forever DM'd at this point, even though I have done player quite a few times, but somebody who's DM'd more than I played as a player, allowing your players to help is very beneficial for you because it takes a lot off your plate. And if you're a player and you haven't heard this, Your DM does a lot, I'm sure. 1000% puts so much into what they do. Any little bit that you can put in there to help is amazing. I promise you they will appreciate it. It doesn't have to be a lot, but being able to add into the world and help your DM run the game is great. So hopefully this helps. Hopefully if you guys like the system or you're interested in checking out more, like I said, I got both links in the description. Oh, yeah, to be fair, so do I. I also struggle with reading because obviously I didn't read 80 different things that specify that this one thing was a little different than the other. But I'm glad that we were able to double check it and at least write it down. I feel like taking these notes was also very beneficial because doing so helped me kind of break down a little bit more than I would have normally and was able to give me a little bit more perspective on how this system really works. And it also already had me ask questions, helped me kind of get an idea of if it's, because I pretty much related it all back to my tenants. Like, what am I looking for in this? All my notes focused on that. Is this what I wanted out of it? Am I worried that this is going to ruin it? And similar to how I talked about with Burning Wheel, I wrote down some stuff and I made all my decisions based on those things. So do the same thing for your characters and your NPCs. That's what I'm saying. That's a full circle right there. I just drew it. But yeah, check it out if you like it. I'm not sponsored, but if you like it, give it a shot. If not, I understand, but it's there. I don't know if I'll put this up, probably not, but this document, this is really for me, because if I come back to this myself, I will definitely be probably making more notes based off of it as well for my own consumption, and probably for that of if I decide to run it for the group that I play with normally. But yeah, anyway, I had fun with it. I hope everyone who checked in did as well. I hope to do these again sometime. Tomorrow I'll be back. I'll be playing Skate Story again. I'm on chapter 3, I think, of the game. And I believe there's 10 chapters from last I looked it up. So I plan on playing another chapter tomorrow. And since Saturdays I do long streams, I was going to play Persona. I decided instead I might just finish up Skate Story. Since I usually I can do about 6 or 7 hours that day, I might just finish Skate Story instead. I think that's something I actually want to do. I'm really loving that game. I can't wait to get back to it. But I will get back to it tomorrow at noon Eastern time. So if you like listening to me and you want to see me play that game, come and join me. But thank you, everybody. I had a lot of fun. I hope to see you all later. And I hope you guys have a good day. All right. Adios. Goodbye.